I would like to introduce Dr. Tom Nebel from GiANT Worldwide. Tom is an experienced, seasoned consultant who brings real-world experiences to his clients. At National Exchange Bank and Trust, we have engaged Tom to help our managerial team to identify key points of our culture, to better communicate with each other, to identify those differences that make us unique, but also unite us. Tom?
All right, thank you, Dick. Yeah, as Dick said, my name is Tom Nebel, and I work in helping organizations work more intelligently and getting their people into great places of communication. So I'm pleased to share with you some things I think can be helpful to you in the space of family-owned or closely held businesses. So we gave this a little title about communication and company culture, and just a word about culture. We all know what culture feels like. You go into a place and like, this place is alive or this place is stifled. We all know what that feels like, but a lot of times we don't know what the components are that actually create positive culture. We have some good-natured efforts at some things here and there that might help employees come alive, but we don't really have a structural framework. So I'm going to show you what it looks like to actually consider the components of healthy culture. And then I'm going to get into real-time space to show you some things that'll be helpful to you as you think about your family-owned or closely held business culture. And then in a few minutes during our Q&A, I'm going to be inviting my colleague, Kayla Kersey. Kayla lives in New Mexico, and she is a veteran of family-owned business and is a whiz. And we use some of this together as we do our consulting. And she'll tell you a personal story on how she got involved in seeing her company, a family-owned business, come alive. So here are our components. We talk about a common vocabulary. To create culture, you have to have a situation where the same words mean the same thing to the same people at the same time. And I know within your industry, within your company, you have acronyms, you have all kinds of shorthand for explaining various things to one another. I'm going to suggest that if you have those type of common words as it relates to leadership, it's going to help you have fewer conversations and call more plays. I'll explain that in a moment. So this then gets baked up into visuals, because visuals signal very quickly. Think of all the signs you've already seen today that have allowed things to be very visual and then allow things to go quickly and accurately in conversation. So then we're after objective language. You'll see just what I mean in a moment. So the same words are meaning the same thing. That creates productive communication. And then consequently, that brings us into healthy spaces of healthy cultures. And as you can see from the indicator on the right, it's a pressure gauge. And you've heard this phrase before. I think it originated with Peter Drucker: culture trumps strategy, or as we know, I think he would say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So hang with me and I'll tell you a quick story. I live in Madison. And therefore, I know I'm speaking to a lot of cheeseheads. And I'll just tell you a story from a couple of years ago when I was speaking about the tools that we use in GiANT on a Green Bay Packers fans cruise. So I was invited by the Packers to come on, and I was doing some things about Lombardi and culture and all this kind of a thing. And the person who was flanking me throughout this presentation was John Brockington. Some of you will remember him from back in the 1970s. I grew up, John Brockington was my hero just like every other kid my age. So John was helping me on this, and at a certain point when I was doing a presentation, and I forget which one it was, but we had about 100 people in the room. You see Leroy Butler is there also, but a number of players, past and present, and a number of fans. At a certain point, I just had this little brain flash, and I looked over at John Brockington, and I pointed at John. I said, "John, call a play." And he was kind of like stunned, like if someone said, "Tom, tell a joke." But he was like, "What?" And he said, "Any play?" And I said, "Yeah, John, any play from back when you played it with the Packers, just call out a play." He says, "Okay." So he rolled out a football play, and I've not been in a football huddle. I don't believe I ever have, other than backyard football. But the language that he used, this play that he called, it came out of his mouth flawlessly. It maybe took 2 or 3 seconds to convey it. And I said, John, you're making my point. Imagine if every time you went into the huddle, you had to have big, long explanations about you go here, you go there, you take out the mic back, you cut through the A slot. I mean, if you had to do all of that, there would be so much confusion that would lead to a whole lot of blame. It would lead to a lack of productivity. It would lead to a lot of losses. So I want you to think about what would it look like if within your culture you had less blame, you had more objectivity, people could move seamlessly, and there'd be clarity. That's what we're after. So that's why I say, let's call more plays and have fewer exhausting, yeah, but, I meant, you, me conversations. And earlier when Dick introduced me, he was talking about those are the sort of things that I've been doing actually in the company that Dick is part of. All right, so here we go. We're going to talk about just a couple of common areas. Kayla will respond to your questions, by the way, so be cognizant of that. But I'm going to show you one tool. We call this effective delegation. Do you see that there's a fulcrum in the middle, and it's like a seesaw or a teeter-totter, and you see some things that are balanced. So just think about this tool within the context of your family-owned or closely held business, because I can practically guarantee you that the way that authority and responsibility pivots will have an awful lot to do with how seamless your communication and your effectiveness is. So think of these two constructs. Authority. Let's say on the authority flow chart, I have certain things that I have the authority to call and to do. Now, there's also this issue of responsibility. So someone is responsible for getting things done, right, for achieving certain numbers, whatever it might be. Now, if someone has responsibility and they also have authority, and it's balanced pretty well, like if I'm charged to do something, I also have the power to do something about it. It could be letting someone go, right, or it could be using financial resources, whatever it might be. But here's what happens. If authority and responsibility get out of whack, disempowerment happens, or self-preservation happens. I'm going to show you another zero in on this, and I'm only really going to talk about the disempowerment. So I'm going to show you what this might look like in another sense. So let's say I have authority and responsibility, and they're balanced out well. A lot of times, family situations cause these things to get out of whack. Like, what if somebody has a lot of authority? It's been entitled. I grew up with this authority, but I don't have any responsibility. They could walk in, bark out orders. They become the conversation piece after they've left. And what happens is you're not getting a very good culture. Okay, but what the converse of that is, what if I have responsibility but I have no authority? Do you see how that tilts down? And now responsibility has been heavy, but I have no authority. That is what we call disempowerment. I would urge you, if you're looking to build a family or a positive culture in your business, I would urge you that what you've got to do is make sure everyone on your team has commensurate authority and responsibility. And by the way, the common language, do you remember what I said about that? The same words mean the same thing to the same people at the same time. For me now, as a team member in your company, to be able to use these words and to say, all right, I just heard that I've been given the responsibility. Do I also have the authority? And then for us to have a conversation so it doesn't go awry. We all understand what that is like. It's happened to us when we've been given responsibility and someone has trumped us, taken away the authority. That's a surefire way to have a culture that is growing weeds. And you don't want that. We know that culture, healthy culture, makes everything go so much better. In a little while, Kayla will respond to your questions about this, but she's got some inside baseball stories in her own family-owned business where these situations can really take us into spaces we don't want to be. Authority balanced with responsibility. I'm going to show you one more tool. It's really critical to understanding this construct if you want to have a healthy and engaged, life-giving culture where everything that matters and everything that is measured is growing. Okay? And here's the next tool. We call this provisional plan and promise. Now, do you remember what I said about common language? I teach this tool everywhere because dashed expectations is a surefire way to destroy trust and also to start to erode your culture. So we use this tool, and once you see the tool and you understand it, you never even have to look at it again because you're going to remember the words provisional, plan, and promise. Okay, so on the y-axis, certainty. We're talking about how certain are we about what we just were talking about. All right? So let's just say in a team meeting, the boss says, well, I think that we ought to hit this number by a certain time, and we ought to plan for whatever. That he starts just kind of dreaming into the future. And by the way, oftentimes founders of family-owned companies, the founders, if they're still around, they've been future-oriented people who saw possibilities. Well, a lot of times people will hear that as promise, even though it might be provisional. And promise means, hey, we are dialed in. We really mean this, and you could take it to the bank, figuratively, literally, that we're going to be doing this. Plan is somewhere in the middle. It says, hey, we're on the way to figuring this out. Use this always in my family. One of my sons really speaks provisionally. Hey, do you want to go for a bike ride this Sunday or this weekend? Oh, yeah, I'd love to do that. In my mind, hey, we're at promise. In his mind, well, wait a minute, I got some other things to figure out. So he helped me with a brake job not long ago. And you know how we worked that out? I said, hey, Andrew, could you help me with this brake job? He said, Dad, I promise. He said, what I can only go provisional on right now is when. And I said, well, do you think it's possible next Sunday afternoon? He says, I still have to go provisional, but I can get to plan by Wednesday. I said, awesome, now we're communicating. And so I said, on Wednesday, then I can ask you if we're at promise, and he said, absolutely. So on Wednesday, I said, hey, where are we at in terms of Sunday afternoon? He said, Dad, yeah, I can't do this Sunday afternoon, but I can promise you the following Sunday afternoon. I said, okay, so we're at promise? He said, yep, bingo. The beauty of this is you use this agile language in your company. You put up the picture. I mean, you remind one another, hey, are we at provisional? Are we at plan? Are we at promise? Because you know personally, when you assume something is going to happen on the basis of what's been said, and then it doesn't happen, you feel some degree of disempowerment and anger that could accompany that. Or sometimes you're thinking out loud and you want others to be able to understand you're thinking out loud. So you just use these words, provisional, plan, and promise. I think Kayla will have some good Q&A on that. All right, I'll show you one more. Okay, and there's a lot on this slide, and I don't want you to get buried in the weeds on it. We'll show you that we have an offering or an opportunity if you want to hang with us in the coming weeks. We'll just do some drop-in times. But on the left, I want you to see that there are future-oriented people. Don't worry about the words pioneer, creative, connector right now. That's too much for the couple of minutes we have left. But you have people on the left that are future-oriented. They look across a chasm and they say, we'll figure it out. We know how to get there. We can pole vault over. It'll take care of itself. We can jump. We can hot air balloon. We'll figure it out. This could be for a company project. It could be for a personal project. And inside their minds, here's what they're going. If the vision's compelling, we'll find a way. Do you see over on the right, you have what we call the more present-oriented people. By the way, when you see the word guardian and nurture, it actually shows up to be about 73% of the population. So about 27 are future-oriented in the way they look at life. And then you've got about 73% are more present-oriented. they are the ones least likely to jump across a chasm. They actually like future vision. They actually want to see better things happen. But what they will say is, in their minds, the vision might be compelling, but without a bridge, I'm not coming. Do this all the time, by the way, in Dick's company as I work with the HR director, because she's on the Guardian side, and she'll say, Tom, I love the awesomeness, build me a bridge, because I got to understand what's happening. And she'll say, it could be a rickety bridge. It doesn't have to be a concrete bridge, but help me understand. And we put the pressure on the 27% future-oriented to build a bridge for the other side, although we're going to say both sides work together. So you think about sales and how they could be out selling the moon, and then you got the guardian and nurturers on the other side that they're on the delivery and they're going, uh-oh, we have to have conversations. This will help you a lot in terms of building company culture. All right, so I told you as we're wrapping up, and in a moment, Kayla will be with us. And what we're saying is that we are offering a virtual coffee. If you want to keep the conversation going, you can see the emails at the bottom of the screen there. And you can also see that we're doing this on the 28th of July and also on August 11th. Love for you to drop in on us, and there's a way that you can link in, and we'd be happy to continue the conversation. Best wishes to you. Really appreciate you being in the room with me. And now we're going to hand it over to Kayla, who is going to address your questions and responses. Thanks.
All right, hello everyone. I hope that you all can hear me great, and we're actually really lucky that Dr. Nebel is here as well. So if anything comes up or anybody has any questions, feel free to turn off your mute and ask us, or put it in the chat, and we'll be watching both. And we'll wait a few seconds for those to come in and the video to go away.
Yeah, that's a little bit annoying that we keep looking at me, and I'm not exactly sure why that hasn't disappeared. But we have about 10 minutes to do some Q&A. Yes. And yeah, take it from there.
Yeah. So while we're waiting, I'll just go ahead and introduce myself a little bit more while we wait for people to see if we have any. There we go. All right. So my name is Kayla Kersey. I'm in New Mexico, and I worked for the family business that my dad started for the last 14 years. And spent the last 5 years within the company actually using these tools to build the culture and to continue the culture that he founded. So that's my history and my story. Just watching the chat and making sure we don't have any other questions. All right. All right, so intuitively I understand what plan means, but can you put a little more context around it? Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So thank you, George. I'll give you a story of how we have come to decide that, and I'll give you within the company. So I work directly with my dad, and he is more apt to speak provisionally, and I'm more apt to hear everything as a promise. And so what was happening within our culture was, I would get frustrated because I felt like he was breaking promises to me. And he would get frustrated because I was thinking that he was breaking those promises when he was really more provisional. So I think when I hear plan, I think putting context around that means, okay, what does the plan means? Only under drastic circumstances would this change. So we would be sitting in a meeting, in a conversation, and I would start writing something down in the meeting, and he would say, wait, hold on, this is provisional. And I said, okay, so we can stay in provisional for so long, but what would a plan look like? Should I ask again in a couple of weeks? And really it's putting more context to the dates and the times that something will be put into place. So I hope that's helpful on the context, but hey, we're going to roll out this new health plan. The plan is that nothing is going to change in the cost to the employees. And a plan means unless something drastically really changes. And so we had a date that said, okay, if nothing changes at by November 21st, then we will start communicating that. And so really putting some parameters and dates, times when we're going to follow back up, that's what makes it go from provisional to plan, in my case. Hope that was helpful. Tom, any thoughts on that?
No, nicely done. I mean, we gave you a little bit, just a couple of tools, but Kayla, you were part of a company of, I think it was 600 employees. And
Yes.
I think you should, keep putting questions up. People are asking about something.
Yeah.
But let me manage the chat. We didn't expect I was going to be able to be here today.
Right.
But give us a little more backstory.
Yeah, that sounds great. Oh, look, we have Aaron asking specifically, so what are the first steps that a creative thinkers can take to build a bridge for the guardians? That is a great question, and I happen to be a guardian. And a guardian, just so people who know, creative thinkers, they are a little more future-oriented. Actually, they're the most future-oriented, probably, voice. And then the guardians, they're the more present-oriented voice. And so I can speak to this from personal. The first step is really involve me in the plan and in the discussion, right? So for present-oriented voices, it's really important that we start with why. So what happens if we don't do this? What happens if we do? And what happens if you guys did and other people weren't really engaged in that? And so I think that it's important that we are intentional about building that bridge, and really, helping us to picture ourselves within your vision. So whatever that looks like, help us get there, because we're going to be so focused on how it impacts the people around us or the systems and how they might change. And so hopefully that's helpful, Aaron. And then the other thing that more present voices are really, really focused on is running a pilot project where it's possible. So in larger companies, that might be an option. Let us see, but also value the contribution that we bring, the really systematic thought process, or us being concerned about how relational harmony is going to be impacted. So that's a great question, Aaron. I hope that was helpful. All right. Thanks, Tom, for putting the info for the virtual coffees. We are pretty fun to hang out with, I do have to admit.
Yeah, so far, yeah. And I think, that Kayla lives in New Mexico. I live here in Madison. So we'll get you a Packers shirt or something, Kayla, to
there you go.
Help you with the button. Yeah.
Actually brings up, there was a question that came up in a session earlier about how culture is impacted by remote teams. And working remotely. And I think one of the most important things for us to be considerate of in our leadership is, number one, we have to be intentional, not accidental. So relationships don't happen by accident. We really do have to be intentional about that informal time that we usually spend when we walk down the hallway and we say hello and we shake each other's hands. Or maybe now we kick each other's feet. I'm not sure how that's changing at this point. New Mexico is still pretty shut down. So I think just considering how much formal time are we spending on projects and jobs that we need to get done and tasks that need to be finished, and are we creating opportunities for informal time so that, maybe we have a happy hour at the end of the day where people can hop on and just spend time communicating with each other. So I think culture is definitely impacted by remote, but I also believe that leaders can be intentional about creating opportunity for that informal time to continue to build relationships. So wanted to make sure I addressed that question from earlier.
In fact, I'll add something very quickly, and I like the roundtable that preceded us here, but because there's this whole thing, we put it this way: leaders define the culture, they don't just describe it. So you got to be careful, like to say, hey, we're open and honest, and you put that on the wall, or we're all willing to take challenges. Well, the leaders will define that. Okay, so the humility piece that I loved in some of our presenters, I mean, that's a huge thing. Some of us are not naturally humble. Hello. All right. So I will just say, like, relative to this objective language that we're talking about, 5 years ago, just showing one tool, and Kayla, we're not getting into it, it's called the 5 gears. You were just describing a gear there, by the way. Mm-hmm. That visual healed, and this is the honest to God truth, it healed my relationship with my 26-year-old son. and it healed us in about 10 minutes, as opposed to 26 years of yeah buts and stay in your place and things like that. So it's part of us becoming leaders others want to follow. The fact is that it can happen. It's just more than aspirational, though. You can put words out there, but you really want to learn to actually be able to live into those places.
I love it. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Tom. That's great. All right, we have another really good question from Aaron. So are there any strategies that you have employed that help convey confidence to your customers and employees in your reopening plans? Yeah, so great question. It has been definitely an adventure to focus on how are we bringing not just, support, but also challenge in our conversations. And it starts with your culture and how the employees are receiving that from the leaders, right? So really focused on creating a culture of empowerment and opportunity. And I'm going to go back to the tool that Tom shared that says, we have to balance authority and responsibility. And I'm going to challenge us to say that's not just within the company to our employees, but it's also with our customers. So do they also have the authority and responsibility and the empowerment to choose whether or not, so we're actually a service company. So we do service residential plumbing, heating, cooling, drains, which means that our employees, needed to change how they were going to approach that. Homes were breaking quicker than we could really keep up with it because people were home more. And so really I think that the strategy that we used to employ that was making sure that we really balance authority and responsibility, not just for each individual person to feel safe and to feel like they can do their job well, but also the customer having that choice of saying, who do you want in your home? What does that look like? Is there any specific needs that you have that we can serve you well? So that's just an example of how our company was handling that. And I really think trying to remember that balance of authority and responsibility. It's not just about you and your employees, it's about your customers and the community as well. So
actually, I'll give you a quickie on this, Aaron. One of my clients is in Northeast Wisconsin. They're a winery. I'll bet you've heard about them. And they've had to balance all this stuff like who's safe, how, whatever. Now, provisional plan promise, they have used that like crazy, but they communicate that within the culture, within their own culture. But then also you watch on their Facebook page how they're doing some of those things too. So it's about common language. We've just zeroed in on a couple of tools. And I wonder, is there anything else you feel like you'd want to show? I don't even know how much time we've got, Kayla. And I'll put that one more time because I'd love to have conversations with you or for you.
Right.
Want you to build the culture that we aspire toward.
Yeah. So I think that just to go back to the family business conversation, as a second generation working within, my dad's business for the last 14 years, I think that, as we consider generational differences within the business, we have to consider the authority and responsibility tool. I always heard that it's up to the second generation or the next generation to set that standard, because if you're a parent, you know that, you would do anything for your kids. And sometimes what that means is that you'll see family business people come in and they will have more authority than responsibility, similar to what Tom shared in his video and his presentation. So I think just first step is always going to be, for that generation, have you had an opportunity and have you been intentional about self-awareness? What are you doing with that authority and what does that look like? And as I would move throughout the organization doing different tasks and having different responsibilities and leadership and, from the ground up, it was important that we always remembered, if I said something, even if I wasn't in the authoritative role or the leadership role in that, I would have to make sure people understood that I didn't have the authority to make that decision or the responsibility. So as I stated my opinion, it was always something for me to consider as a next generation family business member and my responsibility for that. So, all right, good. Anything else before looks like we have 35 seconds. So Yeah. So any other questions, just real quick? If not, I hope that, this is a fun conversation. Tom and I love to talk about culture, and I am very passionate about family business. So I hope that some of you all will join us to continue the conversation. Obviously, this is not long enough for us to say everything we want to say and to hear all your questions. So really hope that we can see you. And thank you, Tom, so much for sharing everything you did.
Hey, you're welcome. Yeah, we're for you all, and love to be there for